You are not going to believe what happened on Flight 492 out of Chicago today. We've all seen bad airline behavior, but this is on a different level. Imagine a 10-year-old boy sitting quietly in his seat, holding his boarding pass, only to be dragged off the plane by a flight attendant who claimed he didn't pay. She humiliated him. She left him stranded. But she made one fatal mistake. She didn't check the last name on his manifest. That terrified little boy? His mother isn't just a passenger. She's the regional director of TSA operations, and she was watching the whole thing unfold. You are about to see the most satisfying instant karma in aviation history. Grab your popcorn, because Patricia Caldwell is about to learn exactly who she just messed with. The fluorescent lights of Chicago O'Hare's Terminal 3 hummed with that specific, headache-inducing frequency that only weary travelers seem to notice. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of gray, slushy, mid-November day that made everyone in the security line a little more irritable than usual. Roman Jackson, however, wasn't irritable. He was 10 years old, wearing a slightly oversized hoodie with a NASA logo on the chest, and he was terrified. This was his first time flying alone. The unaccompanied minor lanyard around his neck felt heavy, like a neon sign screaming to the world that he was vulnerable. He gripped the strap of his backpack until his knuckles turned ashen. Inside that bag were his essentials: a Nintendo Switch, a bag of gummy worms, and a handwritten note from his mom, Beatrice. "Be brave, Roman. I'll be waiting at the gate in DC. Text me when you sit down. Love, Mom." He checked his phone. No signal yet deep inside the terminal corridor. He shuffled forward as the line for gate K-12 began to move. The monitor above read, "Skyway Airlines Flight 492 to Washington, DCA. Boarding now." Standing at the podium, checking boarding passes with the efficiency of a machine and the warmth of an iceberg, was Patricia Caldwell. Patricia had been flying with Skyway for 22 years. She wore her seniority like a weapon. Her uniform was impeccable navy blue, perfectly pressed, with a silk scarf tied in a knot so tight it looked like it might cut off circulation. Her blonde hair was lacquered into a helmet of hairspray that defied the laws of aerodynamics. To Patricia, passengers weren't customers, they were cattle. And today, the cattle were annoying her. Zone 3. "I said Zone 3 only," Patricia barked into the microphone, her eyes scanning the crowd with disdain. She spotted a man trying to sneak into the line early. "Sir, step back. Can you read?" "Zone 3." The man retreated, muttering under his breath. Roman swallowed hard. He was technically pre-boarding as a minor, but the gate agent at the counter had told him to just wait for the first general group because the escort hadn't shown up yet. He approached the podium, clutching his paper ticket. Patricia looked down. Her eyes narrowed behind her rimless glasses as she took in the sight of the young black boy standing alone. She didn't see a child. She saw a delay. She saw a complication. "Ticket," she snapped, extending a manicured hand without making eye contact. Roman handed it over. I'm supposed to wait for the escort," but the lady said. "Quiet," Patricia interrupted, snatching the paper. She scanned it. The machine beeped green. "A valid ticket. Seat 14B. Most flight attendants would have smiled, maybe asked him if he was excited for his trip. Patricia frowned at the screen. She typed something into her terminal. "This is a weird fare code," she muttered, mostly to herself. She looked at Roman, really looked at him, for the first time. Her gaze lingered on his sneakers, expensive Jordans, and the pristine condition of his backpack. A flicker of something ugly passed behind her eyes. Bias is rarely loud. Usually, it's a quiet assumption. And Patricia assumed that a kid like this, flying alone on a prime afternoon route to DC, was likely a system error, or worse, a scam. "Where are your parents?" she demanded. "My mom is in DC, Roman said, his voice small. "I'm flying to see her." "Unaccompanied minor?" "Yes, ma'am." Patricia sighed, a long, dramatic exhalation of air that signaled to everyone in earshot that she was suffering. "Fine, go. But don't think you can run around my cabin. Sit in 14B and stay there. If I hear a peep out of you, we're going to have problems." Roman nodded quickly, snatching his ticket back as she thrust it at him. He hurried down the jet bridge, the cold air of the tunnel hitting his face. He felt like he had just escaped a predator. He found 14B easily. It was a middle seat, but he didn't mind. He stowed his backpack under the seat in front of him, buckled his seatbelt tight, and pulled out his phone. He texted his mom, "I'm on." The lady at the gate was scary. He waited for the 3 dots to appear, but the plane's Wi-Fi hadn't kicked in yet. As the plane filled up, the atmosphere grew stuffy. A heavy-set man in a business suit took the window seat, 14A. He gave Roman a polite nod and immediately opened a laptop. The aisle seat, 14C, remained empty for now. Roman tried to make himself invisible. He opened his comic book and kept his head down. 10 minutes passed. The boarding was nearly complete. That was when Patricia Caldwell marched down the aisle, her heels clicking rhythmically on the thin carpet. She wasn't doing safety checks. She was counting heads. She stopped at row 14. She looked at her manifest, then at Roman. "Let me see your ticket again," she said. It wasn't a request. Roman jumped slightly. He fumbled in his pocket and produced the crumpled boarding pass. Patricia took it, holding it up to the light as if inspecting counterfeit currency. "This boarding pass. It's printed on standard paper. Did you print this at home?" "The lady at the front desk gave it to me," Roman said. "The kiosk, you mean?" "No, the desk." Patricia let out a scoff. "Kid, we don't use this paper stock at the desk. This looks like a copy." She looked at the man in 14A. "Sir, did you see him come on? Did he sneak past the gate?" The man in the suit, whose name was Robert O'Malley, looked up, confused. "What?" "No. He walked on right before me." He scanned his ticket. "I heard the beep." "You heard a beep?" Patricia repeated condescendingly. "Machines beep for errors too." She turned back to Roman. "I need to see your ID." Roman's eyes widened. I'm 10. I don't have a driver's license. School ID. Passport. Something. My mom has my passport in DC. She said I didn't need it because I'm a minor domestic traveler." Patricia crossed her arms. The plane had gone quiet. Rows 12 through 16 were watching now. The tension was thick, suffocating. "So," Patricia said, her voice raising slightly, ensuring the audience could hear her performance of authority. "No ID. A suspicious boarding pass that looks photocopied. And no guardian present. You know what I think? I think you're trying to snag a free ride." "I'm not." Roman's voice cracked. Tears welled in his eyes. "My mom bought the ticket. She works for the government." Patricia laughed. It was a cold, brittle sound. "Oh, sure she does, honey. And I'm the Queen of England. Listen, I don't have time for fairy tales. We are 5 minutes from pushback. I need you off this plane so we can verify this ticket." "But the plane will leave," Roman cried. "That's not my problem. If you have a ticket, you can catch the next one. But you are not flying on my aircraft with fraudulent documents. Get up." Robert O'Malley in 14A slammed his laptop shut. "Hey, wait a minute. This is ridiculous. He's a child. You can check the manifest on your tablet. What's his name?" Patricia whipped her head toward Robert. "Sir, do not interfere with flight crew instructions. That is a federal offense. Unless you want to join him on the tarmac, I suggest you stay out of it." She turned back to Roman. Her patience evaporated. She reached into the row, her hand grabbing the sleeve of his NASA hoodie. "Let's go." Now, the physical contact changed everything. When Patricia's fingers dug into the fabric of Roman's hoodie, a gasp rippled through the cabin. It wasn't a gentle guide. It was a yank. Roman scrambled to unbuckle his seatbelt, his hands shaking so violently he couldn't find the latch. I'm trying, he sobbed. "Stop stalling," Patricia hissed. She reached over and popped the buckle herself, then grabbed his arm, pulling him up from the seat. "Grab your bag." "Hey!" A woman from across the aisle in 14D stood up. She was holding her phone up, the red recording light blinking. "You can't touch him like that. He's a minor." Patricia didn't even flinch. She was in the zone now, the power trip zone. She spun around to face the woman. "Put that phone away or I will have you removed for compromising flight security. This passenger has invalid credentials. I am doing my job." "He's a little boy," the woman shouted back. "Check the computer." "The computer shows seat 14B is open," Patricia lied smoothly. She hadn't actually checked the live update. She was relying on a printed manifest from 20 minutes ago, before the final gate sync. But Patricia was never wrong. In her mind, she was the captain of the cabin. He is poaching a seat. Now, move. She shoved Roman into the aisle. He stumbled, his backpack dragging on the floor, the strap catching on the armrest. "My bag," Roman cried, trying to untangle it. Patricia kicked the strap free with the toe of her heel. Walk? It was the longest walk of Roman's life. Every face was turned toward him. Some looked sympathetic, others looked annoyed at the delay, but most just looked shocked. He could hear the whispers. "Is he stealing? Where are his parents? That stewardess is crazy." Roman hung his head, the tears flowing freely now, hot and humiliating. He wanted his mom. He wanted to be anywhere but here. As they reached the front of the plane, the cockpit door opened. Captain Anderson, a gray-haired man with a kind face but a strict adherence to schedule, stepped out. He saw the commotion. "Patricia, what's the holdup? We're missing our slot." "Stowaway, Captain," Patricia said, her voice dropping to a professional, weary tone, as if she were the victim here. "Caught him in 14B. No ID, fake ticket. I'm removing him now." Captain Anderson looked at the weeping boy. He hesitated. "He's just a kid, Pat. Did you call the gate agent to verify?" "Gate agent is gone, Captain." They left the bridge. "If we wait to call them back, we miss the window, and we're sitting on the tarmac for an hour. Do you want to explain that delay to corporate?" Patricia knew exactly which buttons to push. Pilots hated delays. They hated paperwork. Captain Anderson sighed, rubbing his temples. He looked at Roman. "Son, if you don't have a valid ticket, you can't be here. Go with the flight attendant back to the gate. They'll sort it out there." "But I do have a ticket," Roman pleaded, holding up the crumpled paper. Patricia snatched it out of his hand again. "I'll keep this as evidence. Move." She practically pushed him through the open aircraft door and into the jet bridge. The air was freezing compared to the cabin. The tunnel. Patricia walked him 10 feet up the ramp, then stopped. She pointed toward the terminal doors. "Go up there and wait. Someone will come for you eventually, and don't you dare try to get back on this plane." "You're leaving me?" Roman asked, his voice trembling. "Here? You're lucky I'm not calling the police right now for fraud," Patricia sneered. "Consider this a lesson. Don't lie to adults." She turned on her heel, walked back down the ramp, and stepped onto the plane. The heavy thud of the aircraft door closing echoed through the metal tunnel like a gunshot. Then, the mechanical whir of the locking mechanism. Roman was alone. He stood in the freezing jet bridge, clutching his backpack. He walked up to the terminal door, but it was locked from the outside, a security feature to prevent people from re-entering the terminal without clearance, though usually it was open during deplaning. He banged on the glass. "Hello? Help?" Nobody heard him. The gate area was empty. The next flight wasn't for 2 hours. Inside the plane, Patricia Caldwell adjusted her scarf. She picked up the PA system microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, apologies for the delay. We had a minor security issue regarding an unauthorized passenger, but it has been resolved. We are now cleared for pushback. Flight time to D.C. is 1 hour and 45 minutes. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight." She hung up the phone with a satisfied smirk. She felt powerful. She had protected her plane. She had maintained order. She had absolutely no idea that the unauthorized passenger she had just abandoned was Roman Jackson. And she definitely didn't know that Roman's mother, Beatrice Jackson, wasn't just working for the government. Beatrice was the director of field operations for the Transportation Security Administration, TSA, for the entire Mid-Atlantic region. And Beatrice was currently sitting in her office in Reagan National Airport, staring at a text message that had finally come through on her son's phone just before he lost signal. "Mom, the lady is yelling at me. She says my ticket is fake." Then, 5 minutes later, a second text. "She kicked me off. I'm in the tunnel. It's cold. The door is locked. Mom, I'm scared." Beatrice Jackson read the text. The blood in her veins turned to ice, and then, instantly, to fire. She didn't panic. People like Beatrice Jackson didn't panic. They executed. She picked up the red phone on her desk, the direct line to the Federal Air Marshal Service and Airport Operations Command. "This is Director Jackson," she said, her voice terrifyingly calm. "I have a code-red security situation involving a minor at O'Hare and a hostile flight crew on Skyway Flight 492. I want that plane grounded. Now. And get me the manifest. I want the name of the lead flight attendant. The war had just begun. and Patricia Caldwell was flying straight into a storm she couldn't even imagine. Beatrice Jackson did not scream. She did not throw her phone. In her line of work, national security emotion was a liability. Emotion made you sloppy. And Beatrice Jackson was never sloppy. She sat in her office at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, TSA, her hand gripping the receiver of the secure line, so tight her knuckles were white. On the wall behind her hung commendations from 2 presidents and a framed photo of her late husband, a former Air Force pilot. "Repeat that, Director," the voice on the other end said. It was Marcus Thorne. Wait, no, I must avoid that name. It was Director Samuel Vance, the Federal Security Director, FSD, for O'Hare International Airport. They had worked together on the post 9/11 restructuring task force. They were peers. Friends, even. I said. Beatrice spoke with a voice that sounded like grinding stones. "My 10-year-old son, Roman Jackson, is currently trapped in the jet bridge of Gate K-12 at your airport. He was removed from Skyway Flight 492 by a flight attendant named Patricia Caldwell. He is alone. He is freezing. And he has a valid ticket." There was a silence on the line. A heavy, terrified silence. "Beatrice," Sam's voice dropped an octave. "You're telling me a crew member abandoned an unaccompanied minor in a sterile area without handing him off to a gate agent?" "I have the text messages, Sam. He says the door is locked. He's banging on the glass." Beatrice looked at her watch. It has been 7 minutes since he texted. "If my son has hypothermia, Sam, if he is scared for 1 more minute, I will not just sue Skyway. I will ground every single one of their birds for a randomized, comprehensive security audit that will last until Christmas. Do you understand me?" "I'm moving now," Sam said, the sound of a chair scraping against the floor audible. "I'm dispatching airport police and the operations team to K-12. We'll get him. Stay on the line." Beatrice didn't stay on the line. She hit the button for her assistant, a sharp young woman named Sarah. "Sarah, get me the CEO of Skyway Airlines. Pull his personal cell. Use the emergency contact list." "Yes, Director." "And Sarah? Alert the FAA liaison. Tell them I'm flagging Flight 492 as a Grade 1 security incident. Interference with a federal dependent and, let's call it, gross negligence endangering life. I want that plane designated persona non grata in the sky." Back in Chicago, chaos was erupting in the operations center. Sam Vance was sprinting down the hallway, barking into his radio. "Unit 4, Unit 7, get to Gate K-12 immediately. Potential trapped minor in the bridge. Override the door codes. Go, go, go." At Gate K-12, the jet bridge was silent and cold. Roman had stopped banging on the glass. He was sitting on his backpack, huddled in the corner near the aircraft interface, shivering. The temperature in the uninsulated metal tunnel was dropping rapidly. He wiped his nose on his sleeve. He felt stupid. He felt like he had done something wrong, even though he knew he hadn't. "Maybe I am a criminal," he thought, the dark thoughts of a scared child taking over. "Maybe Mom is going to be mad at me." Suddenly, the terminal doors at the top of the ramp burst open. 3 police officers and a man in a high-visibility vest sprinted down the slope. "Roman!" the lead officer shouted. "Roman Jackson." Roman stood up, his legs shaky. "I'm here." The officer, a burly man with a gentle face, reached him first. He immediately took off his heavy tactical jacket and wrapped it around the boy's shoulders. "You're okay, son. You're safe. We got you." Sam Vance arrived moments later, breathless. He saw the boy, Beatrice's boy, shivering but unharmed. He exhaled a breath he felt he'd been holding for a lifetime. "Get him to the VIP lounge," Sam ordered. "Get him hot chocolate, get him a blanket, and get paramedics to check his vitals. Now." Sam pulled out his phone and dialed Beatrice. "We have him, Bea. He's cold, but he's okay. He's safe." "Thank God," Beatrice whispered, the first crack in her armor appearing. She took a deep breath, composing herself. "Now, Sam, where's the plane?" "Flight 492 pushed back 10 minutes ago," Sam said. "They are taxiing to runway 28R. They're third in line for takeoff." Beatrice's eyes narrowed. She looked at the flight tracker on her screen. She saw the little yellow plane icon inching toward the runway. "Not anymore," she said. She hung up and dialed the number her assistant had just placed on her desk. It was the direct line to the air traffic control tower at O'Hare. "Tower, This is Director Beatrice Jackson, TSA Regional Operations. Verification code Alpha 9 Zulu Tango. I am issuing a stop order. Director Jackson? The controller sounded confused. Go ahead. Flight Skyway 492. Revoke their takeoff clearance immediately. Order them to return to the gate. Do not let them wheels up. Repeat, do not let them fly. Copy that, Director. Is there a threat on board? Beatrice looked at the picture of Roman on her desk. Yes, she said coldly. There is a criminal on board, and I want her waiting for me when I land. When you land, ma'am, I'm chartering the agency jet. I'll be in Chicago in 90 minutes. Nobody gets off that plane until I get there. Nobody. Inside the cockpit of Skyway, Flight 492, Captain Anderson was running through the pre-flight checklist. The engines were spooling, the cabin was secure, and they were next in line for the runway. Flaps set to 15. The co-pilot, a younger man named David, confirmed. Green lights across the board, ready to go. Captain Anderson keyed the mic. Tower, Skyway 492, holding short of 28R, ready for departure. There was a pause. A long, uncharacteristic pause. Usually, the tower snapped back with a cleared for takeoff in seconds. Skyway 492, the controller's voice came back, urgent and clipped. Cancel takeoff clearance. Hold position. I repeat, cancel takeoff clearance. Anderson frowned. Tower 492, holding position. What's the issue? Weather? Negative, 492. We have a DHS stop order on your aircraft. You are ordered to exit the taxiway immediately at Bravo 4 and return to the gate. Do not, I repeat, do not attempt to depart. Anderson and David exchanged a look of pure confusion. DHS? David whispered. Department of Homeland Security? Tower 492, clarify. Is this a mechanical issue? A security threat? 492, we are just relaying the order. Return to Gate K-12. Law enforcement is meeting the aircraft. Acknowledge. Anderson's stomach dropped. Acknowledged. Returning to gate. He turned to David. What on earth is going on? Maybe a passenger on the terror watch list? David guessed. Or baggage mismatch? Pat said she kicked off a stowaway. Anderson remembered. Maybe the kid left something on board? Or maybe. He didn't finish the thought. He clicked the cabin intercom. Flight attendants, prepare for return to gate. We have been ordered back by ATC. In the cabin, Patricia Caldwell was in the middle of her safety demonstration. Well, the lazy version of it, where she just pointed vaguely at the exits while thinking about her dinner plans in DC. When the captain's voice boomed over the speakers, she froze. Return to gate? The passengers groaned. A collective sigh of frustration rippled through the economy class. Unbelievable, the man in 14A muttered. I'm going to miss my meeting. Patricia grabbed the interphone handset. Captain, it's Patricia. What's happening? The passengers are getting restless. We've been grounded, Pat, Anderson said, his voice tense. Tower says police are meeting the plane. It's a DHS order. Patricia's heart skipped a beat. But then, a smug realization washed over her. The kid. It had to be the kid. She almost smiled. See? She thought. I knew it. That little brat probably tried to sneak onto another plane, or maybe he stole something in the terminal, and now the cops need to question us to see what he did. I was right to kick him off. I just saved this airline a huge headache. She hung up the phone and addressed the cabin with a renewed sense of authority. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. It appears there is a security matter that requires us to return to the gate. This is likely related to the passenger removal we performed earlier. We are just ensuring the safety of all legal passengers on board. We will be underway shortly. She emphasized the word legal with a sharp look at the passengers in row 14, as if to say, you're welcome. The plane lumbered back toward the terminal. As it turned the final corner toward gate K-12, the passengers on the right side of the plane gasped. Whoa, a teenager in a window seat said, look at the lights. Patricia leaned over a passenger to look out the window. The tarmac wasn't empty. It was swarming. 3 Chicago PD cruisers, 2 black SUVs with federal plates, a TSA rapid response truck, and standing right at the base of the jet bridge stairs was a cluster of uniformed officers and men in dark suits. Patricia frowned. This seemed like a lot of fuss for a 10-year-old shoplifter or stowaway. The plane came to a halt. The seatbelt sign dinged off. "Ladies and gentlemen, stay in your seats," Patricia commanded, blocking the aisle. "Nobody stands up until we are cleared." The main cabin door opened. But it wasn't the gate agent who stepped on. It was a federal air marshal, badge hanging from his neck, hand resting near his hip. Behind him were 2 Chicago police officers. The cabin went dead silent. Patricia stepped forward, smoothing her skirt. She put on her best professional victim face. "Officers," she said, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "I assume you're here about the boy I removed? I have his fraudulent ticket right here. I knew he was trouble the moment I saw him. I can give a full statement if—" The air marshal didn't even look at the ticket. He looked directly at her name tag. "Are you Patricia Caldwell?" he asked. His voice wasn't friendly. It was steel. "Yes, I am the lead flight attendant," she said, confused by his tone. "Miss Caldwell," the marshal said, loud enough for the first 10 rows to hear. "I need you to step off the aircraft immediately." Patricia blinked. "Me? Why? I'm the crew. I'm the one who reported the— You are being detained for questioning regarding the endangerment of a minor, violation of federal aviation transport statutes, and willful negligence," the marshal interrupted. He stepped aside, gesturing to the door. "Get your bag. Now." Patricia's mouth fell open. The color drained from her face, leaving her pale beneath her heavy makeup. I don't understand. I was doing my job. He didn't have a ticket." "The ticket was valid, ma'am," the marshal said, "and the mother of the child you abandoned in a locked jet bridge is the regional director of the TSA. She is currently en route to this location, and she is very, very eager to meet you." A pin could have dropped in the cabin and sounded like a gong. From row 14, the man in the suit, Robert O'Malley, let out a loud, incredulous laugh. "Oh, you are screwed." Patricia looked around. The passengers weren't looking at her with respect anymore. They were looking at her with a mix of shock and schadenfreude. She had been the tyrant of the cabin 10 minutes ago. Now, she was the prey. But, Patricia stammered. Her hands were shaking. "Miss Caldwell," one of the Chicago PD officers said, stepping forward. "We can do this the easy way, or we can put you in cuffs in front of all these people. Your choice." Patricia grabbed her tote bag. She felt like she was in a nightmare. She walked toward the door, her legs feeling like jelly. As she stepped off the plane and into the jet bridge, the same cold jet bridge where she had left Roman, she saw the reality of her situation. There were no friendly faces, just grim-faced federal agents. And standing off to the side, wrapped in a thick wool blanket and holding a cup of hot chocolate, was Roman. He was flanked by Sam Vance, the FSD. Patricia stopped. She looked at the boy. Roman looked back. He didn't look scared anymore. He looked at her with the innocent, penetrating gaze of a child who knows who the bad guy is. "That's her," Roman said quietly. Sam Vance stepped forward. He was a large man, imposing. He looked down at Patricia with pure disgust. "Miss Caldwell," Sam said, "you're going to come with us to the holding room. Director Jackson lands in 40 minutes. I suggest you use that time to pray, because I've been in this business 30 years, and I have never seen a woman as angry as the one flying here right now." Patricia Caldwell, for the first time in 22 years of flying, felt true turbulence. And she had no seatbelt. The atmosphere in the secure holding room at O'Hare International Airport was suffocating. It was a sterile, windowless box painted in institutional beige, smelling faintly of floor wax and stale coffee. Patricia Caldwell sat at a metal table, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her perfect hair was beginning to fray at the edges, a visual representation of her unraveling composure. Across from her sat 2 TSA investigators and a representative from the Skyway Airlines legal team, a frantic-looking junior lawyer named Kevin who had been summoned from his lunch break. They had been waiting for 45 minutes. "Can I just explain what happened?" Patricia asked for the 3rd time, her voice shrill. "I was following protocol." The boy looked suspicious. He had no ID. The ticket looked like a printout. "I have discretion as the lead flight attendant to remove potential threats." "Miss Caldwell," one of the investigators said calmly, not looking up from his notes. "The boy is 10. He had a valid boarding pass issued by a kiosk. His suspicious behavior was sitting quietly and reading a comic book. and you abandoned him in a jet bridge with a locked door in 30-degree weather. That is not protocol. That is child endangerment. I told the gate agent to handle him. Patricia lied. We have the security footage, Miss Caldwell, the investigator said, sliding a tablet across the table. Patricia looked down. The screen showed a grainy black and white video of the jet bridge. It showed Patricia shoving Roman out the door. It showed her pointing up the ramp. And it showed her turning around and walking back onto the plane without waiting for anyone. It showed the gate agent's podium completely empty. Patricia stared at the screen. I thought someone was there. You didn't check. The door to the holding room opened with a heavy thud. Silence fell over the room. Sam Vance stood in the doorway. He didn't enter. He just held the door open. Beatrice Jackson walked in. She was still wearing her TSA director's uniform, a crisp, dark blue suit with the DHS seal on the lapel and 3 gold bars on her shoulder boards. She didn't look like a frantic mother. She looked like a tactical nuke in human form. Her eyes were dry, her expression unreadable, but the air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Behind her walked 2 large men in suits, her personal security detail, and, more importantly, Roman. Roman was holding his mom's hand. He looked small next to her, but he wasn't crying anymore. He looked safe. Beatrice stopped at the head of the table. She didn't sit down. She looked at the Skyway lawyer, Kevin, who immediately stood up, sweating. Director Jackson, Kevin stammered. On behalf of Skyway Airlines, we are incredibly sorry for this misunderstanding. We are prepared to offer full compensation and— Sit down, Beatrice said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a gavel. Kevin sat. Beatrice turned her gaze to Patricia. Patricia tried to meet her eyes, tried to summon that imperious flight attendant glare she used on unruly passengers, but it withered instantly against the cold fury of a mother who almost lost her child. You must be Patricia, Beatrice said. Yes, Patricia squeaked. Look, Mrs. Jackson, Director Jackson, Beatrice corrected. And you will address me as such. She pulled out a chair and sat down, directly opposite Patricia. She placed a file folder on the table. Inside were 2 pieces of paper, Roman's boarding pass and a printout of Skyway's own internal policy on unaccompanied minors. My son, Beatrice began, pointing to Roman without looking away from Patricia, called me from a freezing tunnel today. He told me he was scared. He told me a lady yelled at him and told him he was a criminal. I didn't call him a criminal, Patricia protested weakly. I just said his ticket looked fake. You accused a 10-year-old boy of fraud, Beatrice said, her voice rising slightly. You humiliated him in front of 200 people. You dragged him off a plane he had every right to be on. And then you left him. You left him. Beatrice leaned forward. Do you have children, Miss Caldwell? Patricia swallowed hard. No. That explains a lot, Beatrice said. Because if you did, you would know that the first rule of caring for a child, any child, is that you never, ever leave them alone in a dangerous place. You left him in a secure area with no supervision. Do you know what could have happened? He could have wandered onto the tarmac. He could have been hit by a baggage truck. He could have been sucked into an engine intake. Patricia flinched. I didn't think. Exactly, Beatrice snapped. You didn't think. You saw a young black boy in a nice hoodie, and you decided he didn't belong in your sky. You decided he was other. You decided he was a problem to be discarded. That's not true, Patricia cried, tears finally spilling over. I'm not racist. I have black friends. I was just doing my job. Your job, Beatrice said, opening the file folder, is to ensure the safety and comfort of passengers. You failed at both. And now, I'm going to do my job. Beatrice looked at Sam Vance. Sam, what are the charges? Sam cleared his throat, reading from a clipboard. We are looking at violation of 14 CFR Part 121 regarding passenger safety, false imprisonment of a minor, reckless endangerment, and, since you interfered with the travel of a federal dependent during a high-alert security period, we are adding interference with federal transportation procedures. Patricia's face went white. Federal charges? For kicking a kid off a plane? For leaving him to die on a jet bridge? Beatrice corrected. It's a felony, Patricia. The lawyer, Kevin, intervened. Director, surely we can handle this internally. Skyway will terminate her employment immediately, of course. We can settle this without criminal charges. Patricia gasped. Terminate? Kevin, I have 22 years. You had 22 years, Kevin hissed at her. You just cost the airline millions in PR damage and potential lawsuits. You're done. Beatrice looked at the lawyer. Oh, she's definitely done, but that's not enough. She turned back to Patricia. You like power, don't you, Patricia? You like deciding who gets to fly and who doesn't. You like being the gatekeeper. Beatrice stood up. Well, now I'm the gatekeeper. And I'm putting you on the no-fly list. The room went dead silent. Even Sam Vance looked surprised. The no-fly list? Patricia whispered. But that's for terrorists. That's for dangerous people. You are dangerous, Beatrice said simply. You endangered a child. You proved you lack the judgment to be in the air. As the regional director of TSA operations, I have the authority to flag individuals who pose a threat to civil aviation security. Abandoning a minor in a secure zone fits that definition perfectly. You can't do that, Patricia screamed, standing up. I need to fly. It's my life. I visit my mother in Florida every month. I go to Europe in the summers. Not anymore, Beatrice said. You'll be taking the bus. Or the train. But you will never step foot on a commercial aircraft in the United States again. Patricia looked at the lawyer, pleading. Kevin, do something. Kevin looked at his shoes. Director Jackson has the authority, Patricia. There's nothing I can do. Patricia collapsed back into her chair, sobbing uncontrollably. The reality of her karma was crashing down on her. Her career was over, her pension was likely in jeopardy, and she was grounded, permanently. Beatrice wasn't finished. And regarding the airline, she said, turning to Kevin, Skyway flight crews clearly need retraining on unconscious bias and minor protection protocols. Effective immediately, I am ordering a mandatory 30-day review of all Skyway ground handling procedures at O'Hare and DCA. Every single one of your crews will undergo sensitivity training. And I want a personal written apology to my son from your CEO. Today? Done, Kevin said instantly. Absolutely. Whatever you need. Beatrice looked down at Roman. Roman, do you have anything you want to say to her? The room turned to the 10-year-old boy. He looked at the woman who had made him feel so small just 2 hours ago. Now, she looked small. She was crying, her makeup running, her posture broken. Roman didn't yell. He didn't gloat. You shouldn't be mean to people just because you can, Roman said softly. It's not nice. It was a simple, childish statement, but it cut deeper than any legal threat. It highlighted the cruelty of her actions in a way that shamed everyone in the room. Beatrice put a hand on Roman's shoulder. Come on, Roman. Let's go home. She turned to Sam. Process her, Sam. Book her. Then let her walk out of the airport. She can take a taxi. Yes, Director. Beatrice and Roman walked out of the holding room, leaving Patricia Caldwell sobbing into her hands. Outside in the main terminal, the news had already broken. Passengers were glued to the TVs. Someone had leaked the story, probably a passenger on the plane who had filmed the arrest. Breaking news. Skyway flight attendant arrested after abandoning TSA director's son. The headline flashed across the CNN screens in the terminal. As Beatrice and Roman walked through the concourse toward the exit where her private car was waiting, people stopped. They recognized the uniform. They recognized the boy from the news loop. Slowly, a few people started clapping, then more. It wasn't a raucous applause, but a respectful ripple of support. A mother nearby gave Beatrice a nod of solidarity. A TSA agent at the checkpoint stood a little straighter and saluted as she passed. Beatrice didn't acknowledge the crowd. She just held her son's hand tighter. They reached the curb. A black SUV was waiting. The driver opened the door. Mom? Roman asked as he climbed in. Yes, baby? Is she really never going to fly again? Beatrice smiled, a small, fierce smile. Not as long as I'm in charge. Back in the holding room, Sam Vance handed Patricia a tissue. Miss Caldwell, he said, the police are here to take you to the station for processing. You'll be released on bail tonight, most likely. But Director Jackson was serious. Your badge is confiscated. Your airport clearance is revoked. You are now a civilian. Patricia stood up, her legs wobbly. She walked out of the room in handcuffs, flanked by 2 officers. As she was led through the terminal, the same terminal where she had strutted like a queen for 2 decades, she saw the stairs. People were pointing. Some were filming her with their phones. She heard a whisper from a passenger. "That's her. That's the woman who kicked the kid off." She lowered her head. The shame was total. The terminal, once her kingdom, was now a gauntlet of judgment. She had tried to throw a boy off a plane because she didn't think he belonged. Now, the entire aviation industry had thrown her off. The karma wasn't just hitting her. It had run her over, backed up, and run her over again. The fallout was swift, brutal, and public. By the time Patricia Caldwell was released from police custody that evening, her face was on every screen in America. The video of her shoving Roman had been viewed 4 million times in 3 hours. The hashtag number Fire Patricia was trending globally. But the internet fame was the least of her worries. 2 days later, Patricia sat in the office of Skyway Airlines CEO Arthur Henderson. It wasn't the corner office with the view of the runway. It was a small, windowless conference room in the basement of the corporate headquarters. Her union representative, a man named Frank, who usually fought tooth and nail for his members, sat silently beside her. He hadn't said a word in 20 minutes. "Patricia," Mr. Henderson said, sliding a single piece of paper across the table. "This is your termination notice. Effective immediately. For cause." "For cause?" Patricia's voice trembled. "Mr. Henderson, I have 22 years, my pension, my benefits. You abandoned an unaccompanied minor in a secure area." Henderson cut her off, his voice devoid of sympathy. "You violated Federal Aviation Regulation 121.533. You violated Skyway Policy, Section 4, Paragraph 2 regarding minor care. And you caused a PR nightmare that has already cost us a 4% drop in stock value this morning." He leaned forward. "The union has reviewed the footage. They are declining to grieve this termination. You are on your own." Patricia looked at Frank. He wouldn't even meet her eyes. He just stared at his notepad. "But my pension," she whispered. "I'm 3 years away from full retirement." "You lose it," Henderson said coldly. "Gross negligence and criminal misconduct void the vesting period for the final tier. You walk away with what you contributed, nothing more. No flight benefits. No buddy passes. No health care." Patricia felt like she couldn't breathe. Her entire life, her identity, her financial future was gone. "And one more thing," Henderson added. "Director Jackson called me this morning. She wanted to ensure I told you this personally." Patricia looked up, dread pooling in her stomach. "She has formally placed you on the TSA's Insider Threat Exclusionary List. This means you are not only banned from flying commercially, but you are also barred from holding any job that requires an airport security badge. You can't work at a ticket counter. You can't work at a majestic gift shop in the terminal. You can't even drive an Uber if the pickup is curbside at the airport." He stood up. "Please hand over your badge and your uniform scarf. Security will escort you to the parking lot." Patricia Caldwell walked out of that building a ghost. She had spent 2 decades looking down on people from 30,000 feet. Now, she had hit the ground hard. 6 months later, the winter snow had melted, and spring was blooming in Chicago. At O'Hare International Airport, the operations were running smoothly. Beatrice Jackson had kept her word. She had audited Skyway Airlines so thoroughly that they were now the safest, most polite carrier in the sky. Roman Jackson was there too. He was flying to D.C. again to visit his mom for spring break. This time, he wasn't afraid. He walked up to the gate with his head held high. The gate agent, a new hire named Sarah, who had been trained under the new Jackson protocols, smiled brightly at him. "Welcome back, Roman," she said, checking his ticket. "Director Jackson is waiting for you in the VIP lounge in D.C. Captain Anderson is flying you today, and he invited you to come see the cockpit before takeoff." "Cool," Roman beamed. "Thanks, Sarah." He walked down the jet bridge. It wasn't scary anymore. It was just a tunnel to adventure. He boarded the plane and took his seat. First class, 1A, a gift from the airline. Captain Anderson came out, shook his hand, and gave him a set of plastic pilot wings. "Good to have you aboard, son," Anderson said. "We'll take good care of you." As the plane taxied to the runway, Roman looked out the window. He watched the ground crew, the baggage handlers, the fuel trucks. He loved the airport. He loved the movement, the energy. Meanwhile, 10 miles away, in a gritty part of downtown Chicago, a Greyhound bus was pulling into the station. The brakes squealed loudly as the bus jerked to a halt. The air smelled of diesel fumes and wet pavement. Patricia Caldwell stepped off the bus. She was wearing a faded coat and comfortable shoes. She looked 10 years older than she had 6 months ago. The hairspray helmet was gone. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She walked to the luggage bay and began hauling bags out for passengers. "Watch it, lady," a man snapped at her as she accidentally bumped his suitcase. "Sorry, sir," Patricia mumbled, keeping her head down. She was working as a baggage handler for the bus line. It was the only transportation job she could get without a security clearance. The pay was minimum wage. The hours were long, and the passengers were far less polite than the ones in business class. She dragged a heavy duffel bag to the curb, her back aching. She paused to wipe sweat from her forehead. A roar overhead caught her attention. She looked up. High above the grime of the bus station, a gleaming silver jet was climbing into the blue sky. The sun caught the Skyway logo on the tail, making it shine like a star. It was Flight 492 to Washington, D. Patricia watched it soar, higher and higher, free and fast. She watched it until it was just a tiny speck in the clouds. Tears pricked her eyes, but she didn't cry. She didn't have the energy to cry anymore. She just watched the life she used to have fly away, carrying the boy she had tried to throw away. "Hey, Caldwell," her supervisor yelled from the depot entrance. "Quit staring at the sky and get back to work. The Cleveland bus is coming in." Patricia flinched. She looked at the sky one last time, then looked down at the dirty pavement. "Coming," she said quietly. She grabbed another bag and went back to work, grounded forever, while Roman Jackson soared among the clouds. And that, my friends, is the story of how one woman's prejudice grounded her for life. Patricia Caldwell thought she had all the power because she wore a uniform, but she forgot the most important rule of the sky. You never know who you're dealing with. She tried to humiliate a child, but instead, she humiliated herself on a national stage. It's a harsh lesson, but a necessary one. Treat people with respect, not because of who they might be related to, but because they're human beings. Patricia learned that the hard way, and now she has plenty of time to think about it from the ground looking up. What do you think? Was the lifetime ban and losing her pension too harsh, or did the punishment fit the crime? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Let's get a debate going. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And if you haven't already, subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story. We post new drama and karma stories every week. Thanks for watching, fly safe, and remember, always be kind. You never know who's watching. There's a special kind of silence that falls over a first-class cabin when an unspoken social line is obliterated. It's the sound of collective breath-holding as unhinged, blind entitlement meets an immovable wall of absolute authority. When a wealthy, arrogant passenger decided a quiet black woman didn't belong in the luxury seat next to him, he thought he was just flexing his everyday power. He snapped his fingers. He demanded she be moved to the back. He threatened the flight crew's jobs. What he didn't know was that he wasn't just barking orders at a fellow passenger, he was actively dismantling his own empire. He had just picked a fight with the one woman who held the fate of his entire industry in her hands. This is the story of a cross-country flight where unchecked arrogance met a devastating, real-life reality check. Flight 405 from New York's JFK International to Los Angeles was boarding out of Terminal 4, enveloped in the chaotic hum typical of a Friday evening. Outside, rain lashed against the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, delaying departures and fraying nerves. Inside the exclusive first-class lounge, however, the atmosphere was a sanctuary of hushed voices, clinking crystal, and soft jazz. Dr. Victoria Sterling sat in a corner armchair, sipping sparkling water and reviewing a thick, red-tabbed dossier. Victoria, a woman in her late 40s with a sharp, tailored navy blazer and her hair pulled back into an elegant, no-nonsense knot, had just finished a grueling 7-2-hour summit in Washington. 6 months ago, she had been appointed as the executive director of the National Aviation Oversight Board, NAOB, the highest regulatory authority governing domestic airspace, airline compliance, and commercial aviation contracts. It was a job that required an iron will, and Victoria had spent her entire career in aerospace engineering and policy, proving she was made of titanium. She closed her dossier, the gold lettering on the cover gleaming under the lounge lights, and slipped it into her leather briefcase. It was time to board. Victoria preferred to board early. She liked the quiet moments before the cabin filled, taking the time to observe the crew. As the head of the aviation board, she never traveled under an alias, but she rarely announced her title. To the gate agents and flight attendants, she was just a VIP passenger in seat 2A, a window seat on the Boeing 757. She settled into the wide, plush leather seat, adjusting her tray table and placing a noise-canceling headset around her neck. She offered a warm, polite smile to the passing flight attendant, a young woman named Chloe, who offered her a pre-departure beverage. "Just water with lemon, please, Chloe." "Thank you," Victoria said, her voice smooth and grounded. 15 minutes later, the peace of the cabin was shattered. Striding down the jet bridge with the heavy, aggressive steps of a man who believed the world was late for his schedule, came Bradley Covington. Bradley was the CEO of Covington Global Freight, a massive logistics company that utilized commercial airlines to ship millions of dollars in cargo daily. He was 50-something, flushed in the face, wearing a bespoke gray suit that cost more than the flight attendants made in a year, and loudly barking into a Bluetooth earpiece. "I don't care what the union says, fire them," Bradley shouted, ignoring the greeting of the lead purser, Nathan, stationed at the aircraft door. "If the shipment isn't in Seattle by Tuesday, I'm gutting the entire regional management team. Just do it." He pushed past a slower passenger, an elderly man with a cane, without so much as a glance downward. Bradley was used to people moving out of his way. He existed in an echo chamber of wealth and compliance, where his demands were met before they fully left his mouth. As he stepped into the first-class cabin, he stopped in the aisle to shrug off his tailored overcoat, expecting a flight attendant to materialize instantly to take it. When Nathan stepped forward a second too late, Bradley shoved the coat into the purser's chest. "Careful with that, it's cashmere," he snapped, ending his phone call with a sharp tap to his ear. Bradley looked down at his boarding pass, then up at row 2. He saw the empty aisle seat, 2B. Then, he saw the person occupying the window seat, 2A. Victoria didn't look up from the regulatory report she had reopened on her lap. She had felt his chaotic energy the moment he boarded, but she had spent 30 years in corporate boardrooms dealing with men exactly like him. She remained perfectly still, her focus seemingly entirely on the paperwork. Bradley's eyes narrowed. He looked at his ticket again, let out a loud, exaggerated sigh of disbelief, and aggressively tossed his expensive leather briefcase into the overhead bin, letting the lid slam shut with a resounding bang that made several passengers jump. The stage was set, and the tension in the cabin instantly spiked. Bradley did not sit down immediately. Instead, he stood in the aisle, looming over Victoria. He crossed his arms, his face twisting into a scowl of deep offense. He looked her up and down, taking in her understated appearance, the lack of flashy designer logos, the simple elegance of her demeanor, and made a series of snap, wildly inaccurate judgments. "Excuse me," Bradley said. His voice wasn't just loud, It carried the specific frequency of a man accustomed to dressing down subordinates. Victoria finished reading the paragraph in front of her, calmly placed a silver bookmark on the page, and slowly turned her head. She looked up at him with dark, piercing eyes that offered absolutely no submission. "Yes? I think you're in the wrong seat," Bradley stated, waving his boarding pass vaguely in her direction. "This is first class. Row 2. Victoria didn't flinch. "I am aware of where we are. And I am in 2A. As assigned." Bradley offered a patronizing, tight-lipped smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Look, I fly this route twice a week. I know these seats. Sometimes the gate agents get confused and upgrade people from standby or economy without checking the manifest properly. I need to get to work, and I need the window seat. So, if you could just gather your things." He actually reached his hand down, making a sweeping, shooing motion toward the aisle, fully expecting her to scramble out of his way. "I am not a standby passenger," Victoria replied, her tone dropping a fraction of an octave, chilling the air between them. "And 2A is my confirmed seat. Your seat appears to be 2B. I suggest you sit down, as the captain has just turned on the seatbelt sign." Bradley's face flushed a deeper shade of crimson. The audacity of this woman refusing him was completely foreign. He turned his head and snapped his fingers sharply in the air. "Stewardess! Hey, get over here." Chloe, the flight attendant, rushed over, her professional smile firmly in place despite the obvious tension. "How can I help you, sir?" "There's been a mistake," Bradley said, pointing a rigid finger at Victoria. "This woman is sitting in my row. I specifically requested a solo arrangement, or at least someone who fits the profile of a premium cabin. I have highly sensitive corporate documents to review. I cannot have someone looking over my shoulder." The implication was clear, heavy, and dripping with prejudice. Several passengers in row 1 and row 3 turned their heads. A wealthy tech executive in 1B lowered his newspaper, his eyebrows raised. Chloe swallowed hard, maintaining her composure. "Sir, I can assure you there is no mistake. This is a fully booked flight due to the weather delays. Doctor, Sterling is confirmed in seat 2A. Your assigned seat is 2B. I am not sitting next to her," Bradley stated, raising his voice so the entire cabin could hear. "I paid $5,000 for this ticket. I am a Platinum Elite Medallion member. I want her moved. Put her back in coach where she belongs, or bump someone else. I don't care how you do it, just get her out of my space." Victoria slowly uncrossed her legs and leaned forward, resting her hands on her dossier. She looked at Bradley, not with anger, but with the cold, clinical fascination of a scientist observing a particularly volatile insect. "You want me moved to coach?" Victoria repeated softly. It wasn't a question, it was a recording of a fact for later use. "That's right," Bradley sneered, mistaking her calm for capitulation. "Nothing personal, but business is business, and I need the space. You understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," Victoria murmured, pulling a sleek silver pen from her pocket and jotting a quick note in the margins of her dossier. Chloe, looking distressed, tried to intervene again. "Sir, I cannot ask a ticketed first-class passenger to move to the main cabin. It's against airline policy, and it's illegal. If you are unhappy with your seat, you are welcome to take a later flight." "I am not taking a later flight," Bradley exploded, slamming his hand on the back of the seat in front of him. "Do you have any idea who I am? Get me the purser." Now, within seconds, Nathan, the senior purser, arrived at row 2. Nathan was a 20-year veteran of the airline, a man who had diffused brawls, medical emergencies, and celebrity meltdowns. He stepped between Bradley and the seated Victoria, creating a physical barrier. "Sir, I am the lead flight attendant. My name is Nathan. Please lower your voice. What seems to be the issue?" "The issue," Bradley spat, leaning in close to Nathan's face, "is that your incompetent staff is refusing to accommodate my very simple request. I am Bradley Covington, CEO of Covington Global Freight. I want this woman moved immediately. She's making me uncomfortable, and I refuse to sit next to her." Nathan glanced at Victoria. Victoria offered a microscopic shake of her head, a silent signal that meant let him dig. "Mr. Covington," Nathan said firmly, his customer service smile vanishing. "Dr. Sterling is a valued passenger. We do not relocate passengers based on another passenger's personal preferences or discomfort unless there is a safety issue. Your behavior, however, is beginning to border on a safety issue. I need you to take your seat in 2B immediately, or we will return to the gate and offload you. The threat of being kicked off the flight seemed to short-circuit Bradley's brain. For a second, he stood frozen in sheer outrage. Then, a dark, vindictive smirk spread across his face. He leaned in closer to Nathan, lowering his voice into a menacing growl, but perfectly audible to Victoria. "You really want to play this game with me, pal?" Bradley whispered harshly. "My company ships 300 tons of cargo on your airline's commercial bellies every single week. We just submitted a bid to renew our exclusive logistics contract with this carrier. A contract worth $50 million. If you don't move her right now, I will personally call the VP of Operations before we take off. I will have you fired. I will have this little girl," he gestured dismissively at Chloe, "fired. And I will pull my freight contract so fast, it will make your CEO's head spin." Nathan's jaw tightened. Dealing with entitled passengers was one thing. Dealing with corporate blackmail was another. Before Nathan could respond, Victoria spoke up. Her voice cut through the heavy, hostile air like a scalpel. "Mr. Covington," Victoria said, her tone deceptively polite. "You are the Chief Executive Officer of Covington Global Freight?" Bradley turned his glare back to her, puffing his chest out. "That's right. So you finally understand who you're dealing with. Move. And you currently utilize commercial passenger flights to transport your Class 3 cargo?" she pressed, her pen hovering over her paper. Bradley frowned, thrown off by the specific, technical terminology. "Yes. We use commercial bellies. It's standard industry practice. Not that it's any of your business. And you are threatening to leverage your corporate shipping contracts to force an airline crew to violate Title 49 of the United States Code regarding passenger discrimination?" she asked, her eyes locking onto his. Bradley laughed a harsh, barking sound. "Title 49? What are you, a lawyer? Listen, lady, I don't care about regulations. I make the rules. The fine they'd pay for moving you is pennies compared to what I pay them. Money talks. You walk. Now get up." Victoria didn't move. Instead, she slowly closed her dossier. She looked up at Nathan, the purser, who was watching her with a mixture of awe and apprehension. "Nathan," Victoria said, her voice echoing with the sudden weight of undeniable authority, "please inform Captain Miller that we have a security and compliance issue in row 2. Tell him that Dr. Victoria Sterling requires his presence before we push back from the gate." Bradley rolled his eyes dramatically. "Oh, please. You're calling the pilot? What's he gonna do, arrest me?" Victoria finally allowed a small, razor-sharp smile to touch her lips. She leaned back in her seat and looked directly into Bradley's arrogant eyes. "No, Mr. Covington. The captain isn't going to arrest you," Victoria said softly, the silence in the cabin hanging on her every word. "But as the executive director of the National Aviation Oversight Board, I am officially opening an immediate investigation into Covington Global Freight's regulatory compliance, safety protocols, and corporate extortion tactics. And until that investigation is concluded, I am suspending your company's clearance to load so much as a shoebox onto any commercial aircraft in the United States." Bradley's smirk vanished, the color drained from his face, leaving him a sickening shade of pale gray. The silence in the cabin was so absolute, you could hear the rain hitting the fuselage outside. Karma had boarded the flight, and she had the window seat. For exactly 10 seconds, the first-class cabin of Flight 405 existed in a vacuum. It was a profound, suffocating stillness where the oxygen seemed to have been violently sucked from the room. Outside, the rhythmic drumming of the rain against the Boeing 757's fuselage sounded suddenly deafening. Bradley Covington stood frozen in the aisle, his hand still gripping the leather of the seatback in front of him. His brain, accustomed to processing multi-million-dollar logistics algorithms, was currently crashing. The words National Aviation Oversight Board echoed in his head, entirely incompatible with the reality he thought he was controlling. The NAOB? Bradley stammered, his voice losing its booming, aggressive resonance, replaced by a thin, reedy squeak. He looked around the cabin, making eye contact with the tech executive in 1B, hoping for some shared camaraderie, a knowing smirk that this was all an elaborate prank. The executive merely raised a single, judgmental eyebrow and took a slow sip of his champagne, enjoying the show. "That's impossible," Bradley finally managed, forcing a harsh, hollow laugh that fooled absolutely no one. The color was rapidly draining from his neck, leaving his skin a sickly, mottled gray. "You're lying. You're just some passenger trying to make a scene. The head of the NAOB doesn't fly commercial. She certainly doesn't sit quietly while being spoken to." Victoria did not raise her voice. She didn't need to. True power never has to shout to be heard. Slowly, deliberately, she reached into her tailored blazer. Bradley flinched, a microscopic step backward, as if she were drawing a weapon. Instead, she retrieved a slim, dark leather wallet. With a flick of her wrist, she flipped it open and held it up. There, gleaming under the warm overhead reading light, was a heavy, gold and enamel federal badge. Next to it, an identification card bearing the seal of the United States government, a severe photograph of Victoria, and the bold, undeniable title, Executive Director, National Aviation Oversight Board. "I assure you, Mr. Covington," Victoria said, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly soft, conversational volume, "I am entirely real. And I assure you, I fly commercial quite often. It is, after all, the most effective way to observe the actual operational integrity of the airlines my agency regulates. And, quite frankly, to observe the behavior of the corporate partners who utilize them." Bradley stared at the badge as if it were radioactive. His mouth opened and closed silently. A fish pulled abruptly onto the dock. The aggressive posture, the puffed-out chest, the absolute certainty of his own superiority, it all evaporated, leaving behind a desperately panicked middle-aged man who had just realized he had walked barefoot into a minefield. At that moment, the cockpit door clicked open. Captain Miller, a silver-haired veteran with 4 stripes on his shoulders and a posture carved from military discipline, stepped into the galley area. He took one look at the frozen tableau, Nathan standing rigidly, Chloe looking terrified but vindicated, Bradley hovering in the aisle like a ghost, and Victoria calmly holding up a federal badge. "Nathan," Captain Miller said, his deep voice cutting through the tension. "Ground control is asking if we're ready for pushback. What is the holdup in my cabin?" Nathan cleared his throat, standing a little taller. "Captain, we have a situation in row 2. Mr. Covington here," he gestured to Bradley, was refusing to take his assigned seat and was threatening the flight crew's jobs, as well as threatening to leverage his company's commercial freight contracts against the airline if we didn't forcibly relocate the passenger in 2A. Captain Miller's eyes hardened. Threatening his crew was the fastest way to earn a one-way ticket back to the terminal. He turned his gaze to 2A. Victoria snapped her wallet shut and tucked it away. "Captain Miller, I am Dr. Victoria Sterling, Executive Director of the NAOB." Captain Miller's eyebrows shot up. Every pilot in the country knew who Victoria Sterling was. She was the one who had recently grounded an entire fleet of regional jets after discovering falsified maintenance logs. She was an absolute terror to negligent airline executives and a guardian angel to pilots and crews who valued safety over profit. "Dr. Sterling," Captain Miller said, immediately stepping forward and offering a respectful nod. "It is an absolute honor to have you aboard, ma'am. Though I deeply apologize for the disturbance." "The disturbance is not your fault, Captain," Victoria replied smoothly. "However, it has highlighted a severe compliance vulnerability regarding Covington Global Freight. Mr. Covington has just admitted, in front of a dozen witnesses, to attempting to use his commercial shipping contracts to extort your crew into violating federal passenger discrimination laws." Bradley finally found his voice. It was frantic, dripping with the sudden, sharp, metallic taste of fear. "Captain, listen to me. This is a misunderstanding. I was stressed. I have a major merger happening in Seattle. I haven't slept. I just wanted a window seat. She's overreacting." "I don't overreact, Mr. Covington," Victoria said smoothly. "I regulate." The true horror of Bradley Covington's situation had not yet fully materialized in his mind. In the heavily fortified bunker of his corporate ego, he still believed in the invincible power of his net worth. He existed in a world where every mistake had a price tag, and every offense could be smoothed over with a settlement or a high-level phone call. He honestly believed that an apology, perhaps a stiff, insincere one, coupled with a few strategic favors for the airline's executive board, could sweep this unfortunate misunderstanding under the rug. He had no idea how precisely or how ruthlessly Dr. Victoria Sterling operated. To her, he wasn't just a rude passenger, he was a systemic failure in human form. The silence in the first-class cabin was no longer just quiet, it was pressurized. It felt as though the cabin altitude had suddenly spiked, making it hard for the onlookers to draw a full breath. The tech executive in 1B had completely lowered his newspaper, his eyes darting between Victoria's calm, resolute face and Bradley's rapidly deteriorating composure. Victoria picked up her smartphone from the tray table with a steady hand. She didn't scroll through a contact list or search for a name. She simply tapped a single speed dial icon. In the hushed cabin, the faint, rhythmic brr-brr of the outgoing ringtone was audible to everyone within 3 rows. It was the sound of a guillotine blade being hoisted into position. "David," Victoria said the moment the line connected. Her voice was a masterpiece of professional detachment. It was cold, brisk, and entirely devoid of the heat of anger. "It's Victoria. I'm currently on Delta 405 at JFK. I need you to initiate a code red compliance hold, system-wide. Effective immediately." Bradley's breath hitched, a sharp, ragged sound that caught in his throat. "Wait, what are you doing?" he hissed, his voice cracking. He took a frantic step forward, his hand reaching out as if to swat the phone away, but Nathan moved with the practiced speed of a man half his age. The purser placed a firm, immovable hand on Bradley's chest, physically checking his momentum. "Stay back, sir," Nathan commanded, his voice vibrating with a new, emboldened authority. Victoria didn't even blink at the interruption. She continued into the phone, her gaze fixed on a point on the bulkhead, looking through Bradley as if he were made of glass. "Yes, David. Immediately. Target entity, Covington Global Freight. I want an immediate halt on all Class 3 commercial belly cargo originating from their manifests. Inform the FAA, the TSA's Cargo Oversight Division, and all domestic carrier operations centers. Cite suspected exertion of undue influence on flight crews, potential safety compromise, and attempted corporate extortion. No Covington freight goes airborne, not on a passenger jet, not on a puddle jumper, until my office conducts a full, top-to-bottom forensic audit of their logistics contracts and safety protocols." She paused for a heartbeat, listening to her deputy director on the other end. The cabin was so silent you could hear the rain lashing against the fuselage, a frantic drumming that matched the rhythm of Bradley's heart. "Yes, David," Victoria confirmed, her silver pen tapping rhythmically against her dossier. "Ground it all. Every single pallet from Newark to LAX. I want their entire supply chain frozen at the tarmac. I'll formally sign the emergency directives the moment we land in Los Angeles. Thank you." She ended the call with a deliberate tap and placed the phone face down on the leather-bound dossier. The clack of the phone hitting the tray table sounded like a gavel. "You can't do that," Bradley whispered. The booming, resonant voice of the CEO was gone, replaced by a thin, trembling reed of a sound. He looked at Captain Miller, his eyes wide and pleading. "Captain, tell her she can't do that. That's illegal. That's an abuse of power. She's halting millions of dollars of commerce over a seat dispute. This is a private company. You can't just stop the economy because your feelings were hurt." "Mr. Covington," Captain Miller said, his voice dropping into a register of absolute, unyielding gravity. He stepped closer, his presence filling the aisle. "Dr. Sterling is the head of the federal agency that regulates every square inch of the airspace I fly in. She has the statutory authority to ground an airline, let alone a freight contractor, if she deems there is a threat to the integrity of the system. And frankly, sir, considering you just threatened my purser and my flight attendant with their livelihoods in an attempt to subvert airline policy, I'd say she's being remarkably restrained." Buzz, buzz, buzz. The sound came from Bradley's bespoke suit jacket. It was a sharp, aggressive vibration, the haptic feedback of a crumbling empire. He mechanically reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. The screen was a blinding white glare in the dim cabin light. It was a text from Richard, his chief operating officer. "Brad, pick up, now. Delta just pulled our loading clearance in Atlanta. They're saying we're on a federal no-fly for cargo. What is happening?" Before Bradley could even process the words, the phone buzzed again. And again. A cascade of notifications began to scroll down the screen like a digital landslide. Then, The phone started ringing, the harsh, shrill default ringtone tearing through the silence. The caller ID read, Bancroft Pharmaceuticals, V.P. Logistics. This was Bradley's largest client, a multi-billion-dollar account that relied on Covington Global Freight to move time-sensitive, temperature-controlled medical supplies across the country. If those shipments sat on a hot tarmac for even 4 hours, the cargo would be ruined. With shaking hands, Bradley answered. He didn't even have the strength to put the phone to his ear properly. He held it a few inches away, his thumb white-knuckled against the glass. Hello? The voice on the other end was not speaking. It was screaming. Even from seat 2A, Victoria could hear the faint, metallic rasp of a man in a total panic. Bradley, what the hell is going on? The VP raged. I just got a call from our dispatch at O'Hare. American Airlines just kicked our entire oncology shipment off the plane. They said there's a federal code red on all Covington manifests. My team is telling me we're grounded nationwide. We have patients waiting for these doses, Bradley. Do you have any idea what the liability is on this? If this isn't resolved in the next hour, we are pulling the contract and filing for a full breach of service. I'll have your head for this. The line went dead with a definitive electronic beep. Bradley's knees literally buckled. He swayed, catching himself on the edge of the seat in 2C. The phone slipped from his fingers, bouncing off the carpeted floor with a dull thud. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, and filled with the kind of pure, unadulterated terror usually reserved for people watching a natural disaster approach their front door. The arrogant, untouchable CEO who had stormed onto the plane demanding the world bow to his whims was gone. In his place was a broken man watching 20 years of work incinerate in real time. He turned toward Victoria. The sneer was gone. The posture of a king was gone. He looked like he was about to collapse into the aisle and beg for mercy. Dr. Sterling, Bradley choked out, his voice cracking on every syllable. Please. I'm sorry. I was out of line. I was terribly, horribly out of line. I haven't slept. I'm under immense pressure with the merger. I didn't mean those things about the crew. Please, you can't do this. That hold. It will bankrupt us by Monday morning. Our clients will jump ship. My board will. They'll destroy me. Please, I'll sit in the back. I'll sit in the jump seat. I'll apologize to everyone. Just call your office back. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them the compliance is fine. Victoria looked up at him. There was no pity in her eyes, nor was there the petty, vindictive glee Bradley expected. There was only the cold, unyielding wall of consequence. She looked at him the way a judge looks at a defendant who has already been found guilty by a jury of his own actions. Mr. Covington, she said, her voice perfectly even and terrifyingly calm. You stated earlier that you don't care about regulations. You stated that you make the rules because money talks. What you failed to realize is that in this airspace, money is a secondary concern. Safety, integrity, and regulatory compliance are the only currencies that matter. Your profound lack of judgment today, your willingness to use your corporate weight to bully a flight crew into violating federal law, indicates a systemic, cultural failure in your company's leadership. If you act this way in public, I shudder to think what safety corners you are cutting in private. The audit will proceed. It will be thorough. And it will be final. Bradley let out a pathetic, stifled sob, a sound that made the other passengers look away in a mix of pity and secondary embarrassment. He reached a hand out toward her, a desperate, begging gesture that Nathan quickly intercepted. Please, Bradley whispered, a single tear tracking down his flushed face. Captain Miller stepped in, his hand landing on Bradley's shoulder with the weight of a closing cell door. That's enough, the captain said. Mr. Covington, your presence on this flight is no longer a matter of seat assignments. You have become a disruption to the order of this aircraft, and your behavior towards my crew is a security risk. I am exercising my authority as pilot in command. You are no longer welcome on this aircraft. Gather your belongings. Now, Nathan will escort you to the gate. Bradley looked wildly at the captain, then at Nathan, and finally at Chloe. The young flight attendant he had tried to have fired just 10 minutes ago was standing by the galley curtain. She wasn't laughing. She was standing tall, her chin raised, watching him with a quiet, somber dignity that made his previous behavior look even more small and pathetic. You're kicking me off? Bradley whispered, the reality of the public shaming finally sinking in. "Yes, sir, I am," Captain Miller replied, his voice echoing through the cabin. "Now move, before I have Port Authority come down that jet bridge to assist you." The king of logistics began to move, but he wasn't walking. He was retreating, and as he reached for his bag, the entire cabin watched in a silence so thick it felt like history being written in real time. The command from Captain Miller hung in the pressurized air of the first-class cabin, absolute, irreversible, and as heavy as a lead weight. Now move. For Bradley Covington, the 50-something titan of corporate logistics, who had spent the last 2 decades firing loyal employees via brief emails and bullying industry competitors into quiet submission, the physical reality of being formally expelled from a commercial aircraft was entirely incomprehensible. His brain, so accustomed to dictating the terms of every room he entered, violently struggled to process the sheer, humiliating mechanics of his sudden defeat. He stood frozen in the narrow aisle, his hand gripping the premium leather of the seatback in front of him so tightly his knuckles had turned stark white. The sudden rush of adrenaline had abandoned him, leaving behind a cold, hollow vacuum in his chest. He looked down at his own trembling hands, then up toward the sleek overhead bin where he had aggressively, loudly slammed his briefcase just 20 short minutes prior. He felt a bead of cold sweat trace its way down his spine, soaking into the collar of his bespoke Italian shirt. The tailored gray suit he wore, once a uniform of his undeniable dominance, suddenly felt suffocating, sagging on a frame that seemed to have shrunk 3 sizes in the span of a single conversation. Nathan, the senior purser, did not wait for Bradley to find his dignity. He didn't offer a moment of grace for the CEO to collect himself. With the practiced, surgically precise, and utterly devoid of sympathy efficiency of a veteran flight attendant who had just been granted ultimate authority over an unruly passenger, Nathan stepped forward. He reached up, unlatched the overhead bin with a sharp, resounding click, and pulled down Bradley's heavy, monogrammed leather briefcase. He turned and held it out, forcing Bradley to take it. "Your bag, Mr. Covington," Nathan said. His voice was flat, perfectly professional, yet deliberately projected loud enough for every single passenger in the first-class cabin to hear with crystal clarity. "Please gather your overcoat. The gate agent is waiting for you at the top of the jet bridge." Bradley flinched at his own name. He mechanically reached out and clutched the briefcase to his chest like a physical shield, as if the thick leather could somehow protect him from the sheer gravity of his public execution. He turned slowly, his expensive shoes feeling like they were set in drying concrete, and let his bloodshot eyes drag across the faces of the other passengers. He desperately sought a sympathetic gaze, a fellow elite, who would silently agree that this was all a terrible, tragic overreaction. He found none. In seat 1B, the wealthy tech executive had entirely abandoned his financial newspaper. He was holding his sleek smartphone at chest level. The distinctive triple-lens camera undeniably pointed directly at Bradley, recording the entire humiliating spectacle for the world to see. A well-dressed woman in seat 3 made direct eye contact with Bradley, her lips curled in absolute disgust, and let out a sharp, derisive scoff that cut through the quiet cabin like a whip. No one looked away. No one offered a reassuring smile. They had all witnessed his unprovoked cruelty toward Chloe and his arrogant, dismissive treatment of Victoria, and they were universally, silently reveling in the spectacular downfall of a bully. I have a flight to catch," Bradley muttered, his voice a pathetic, fragmented whisper. It was a desperate, nonsensical attempt to maintain some fractured illusion of control over a narrative that had already left him behind. "I have a major merger in Seattle. I can't be delayed." "You will need to rebook with another carrier, sir," Nathan replied, stepping aside and gesturing firmly toward the open aircraft door, his arm acting as an unyielding barrier pushing Bradley forward. "Delta Airlines will be issuing a permanent ban on your profile, effective immediately. Please step off the aircraft." As Bradley shuffled forward, forced to begin his agonizingly slow walk of shame past row 2, he couldn't help but look down one last time at the woman who had single-handedly dismantled his entire life. He expected her to be watching him. He expected a gloating smile, a triumphant remark, or at least the satisfaction of her, acknowledging her victory over him. But Dr. Victoria Sterling was not looking at him. She had already reopened her thick, red-tabbed regulatory dossier. She didn't look up. She didn't offer a smirk. She simply turned a heavy paper page, the faint rustle sounding deafening to Bradley's ears, her sleek silver pen resting lightly, calmly in her manicured hand. She had completely, utterly dismissed his existence. To Victoria, Bradley Covington was no longer a threat, an adversary, or even a nuisance. He was merely a closed file, a problem already solved and discarded. That absolute, chilling indifference cut deeper into his ego than any shouted insult ever could. Bradley stumbled out of the aircraft door and crossed the threshold onto the corrugated floor of the jet bridge. The cold, damp, jet fuel-scented air of the terminal hit him instantly, a harsh and violent contrast to the climate-controlled, sanitized luxury he had just been ejected from. As he walked up the steep, inclined ramp, the heavy reality of his isolation began to set in. The gate agents, alerted by Captain Miller's direct radio call, stood waiting at the top of the bridge, with their arms crossed, their faces locked into masks of stern, unforgiving disapproval. There would be no groveling apologies accepted here. There would be no VIP lounge access for him tonight. There would be no priority rebooking. Suddenly, a sharp vibration erupted from the breast pocket of his jacket. Then another. Then a rapid, relentless barrage of notifications that felt like rapid gunfire against his chest. He pulled his smartphone out, his thumbs shaking so violently he failed to unlock the screen on the first 3 attempts. When the screen finally illuminated, it revealed a catastrophic cascade of digital doom. Message from Richard. Brad, where are you? The FAA just contacted our legal department. They are seizing the manifest logs for the last 6 months. What did you do? Message from Richard. The stock is plunging in, after hours trading. The rumor mill is saying we lost our federal clearance. Call me now. Email from Board of Directors. Emergency meeting convened. 8 p.m. Est. Mandatory attendance. Bradley's breath hitched in his throat, a sharp, ragged sound. He stumbled backward near the very top of the jet bridge, his shoulders hitting the cold metal wall. He leaned heavily against it, gasping for air, as if the oxygen had been siphoned from the terminal. His chest was impossibly tight, his vision swimming with dark spots as the glowing words on his screen blurred into a sickening reality. He had strutted onto Flight 405 as a king, convinced that the world bent to his will. He was walking off a broken man, a catastrophic liability to his own life's work. And as he trudged out into the chaotic, blindingly bright and crowded concourse of Terminal 4, surrounded by thousands of ordinary people who had no idea they were watching a titan fall, the undeniable, agonizing truth finally hit him with the blunt force trauma of a freight train. No one had plotted against him. No one had set him up. He had done this entirely, spectacularly, to himself. The heavy, definitive thud of the forward aircraft door sealing shut was the loudest sound in the first-class cabin, yet it was immediately followed by a profound, collective exhale that seemed to physically alter the air pressure. The suffocating, toxic gravity that Bradley Covington had dragged aboard Flight 405 vanished the moment he was expelled onto the jet bridge. In its place, the soothing, rhythmic hum of the Boeing 757's auxiliary power unit filled the silence, a mechanical heartbeat restoring order to the chaos. In the forward galley, Chloe leaned against the metal counter for a brief, shuddering second. The adrenaline that had kept her spine straight and her professional smile locked in place was finally receding, leaving her knees weak and her hands trembling slightly. She took a deep, steadying breath, smoothed down her uniform skirt, and prepared a fresh tray. She approached Route 2 with a renewed sense of purpose, carrying a glass of sparkling water over ice and a small, warmed porcelain dish of mixed nuts. As she stopped beside seat 2A, she looked down at the woman who had effortlessly shielded her from a corporate giant's wrath. "Dr. Sterling," Chloe said softly, her voice barely rising above the hum of the engines. She placed the items precisely on Victoria's tray table. She hesitated, the strict boundaries of passenger-crew interaction momentarily blurring. I just wanted to thank you for stepping in. We are trained to de-escalate, but usually, when it comes to passengers with that much money or status, we just have to take the abuse to protect the airline's bottom line." Victoria finally looked up from the dense pages of her red-tab dossier. The severe, clinical expression she had weaponized against Bradley softened entirely, melting into a genuinely warm, deeply empathetic smile. She saw the lingering stress in the young woman's eyes and understood the heavy emotional toll of frontline service. "You never have to just take it, Chloe," Victoria said, her tone carrying the gentle but unyielding weight of a mentor. "You and Nathan are highly trained aviation professionals. You are responsible for the safety, security, and evacuation of hundreds of lives at 30,000 feet. Your dignity is not a complimentary amenity included in the price of their first-class ticket. You handled yourself with immense grace under intense, unfair pressure. Do not ever let anyone make you feel small in your own cabin." Chloe's eyes welled with sudden, grateful tears. She blinked them back rapidly, her smile widening into something entirely genuine. "Thank you, ma'am. Truly." A moment later, Nathan walked briskly down the aisle, performing his final safety checks. He paused beside row 2, his posture immaculately straight, and offered Victoria a crisp, deeply respectful nod. "Captain Miller says we have final clearance from the tower, Dr. Sterling," Nathan announced, a quiet note of triumph in his voice. "We'll be wheels up in 5 minutes. We're tracking smooth air all the way to Los Angeles." "Excellent work today, Nathan." "Thank you," Victoria replied, settling comfortably back into the plush leather of her window seat. As the heavy aircraft finally pushed back from the gate, the tech executive in 1B caught Victoria's eye and offered a slow, silent nod of absolute respect. Outside the window, the rain-slicked tarmac blurred past. The immediate, localized drama of Flight 405 had concluded, but the shockwaves of that 20-minute encounter were just beginning to gather speed across the country. 72 hours later, the weather in Los Angeles was a brilliant, cloudless blue. Victoria sat in her sunlit, meticulously organized field office, the distant roar of jets taking off from LAX providing a familiar, comforting background noise. Spread across her mahogany desk were the preliminary reports from the National Aviation Oversight Board's Code Red compliance hold. The true depth of the karma Bradley had invoked was finally materializing into hard, undeniable data. When Victoria had initiated the system-wide grounding, it wasn't merely a temporary inconvenience for Covington Global Freight. It was the equivalent of shining a massive, high-wattage floodlight into the darkest corners of their corporate basement. The forensic auditors Victoria had unleashed teams of relentless, detail-oriented federal investigators didn't just find an arrogant executive with a penchant for extortion. They found a systemic, illegal, and highly dangerous effort to artificially inflate profit margins. Desperate to undercut competitors and maintain his lavish lifestyle, Bradley Covington had authorized a shadow policy. His logistics teams had been intentionally, routinely mislabeling heavy, highly combustible, Class 3 hazardous materials as standard, inert commercial freight. By falsifying these manifests, Covington bypassed expensive safety packaging regulations, specialized handling fees, and mandatory federal reporting, loading volatile cargo directly into the bellies of passenger airliners. It was the ultimate, devastating irony, a poetic justice so sharp it bordered on fiction. If Bradley Covington had simply taken his assigned seat in 2B, swallowed his unfounded prejudices, and ignored the quiet black woman sitting next to him, his company's illegal, corner-cutting practices might have remained hidden in the shadows for years. His own unchecked ego, his desperate need to assert dominance over someone he deemed beneath him, had actively handed the head of the Federal Oversight Board the exact thread she needed to pull to unravel his entire criminal enterprise. By Wednesday morning, the corporate bloodbath was public. The board of directors at Covington Global Freight, facing imminent federal indictments, astronomical fines, and a mass exodus of terrified clients, convened an emergency press conference. Looking pale and deeply shaken, the board chairman announced the immediate, unceremonious termination of Bradley Covington as chief executive officer for cause. Bradley was stripped of his title, his access, and his power. His massive portfolio of stock shares was frozen indefinitely, pending the federal criminal investigation. In the span of a single weekend, his name had transformed from a symbol of industry dominance to a cautionary tale of spectacular, self-destructive corporate hubris. He had traded his empire for a window seat he didn't even get to sit in. Victoria took a slow sip of her black coffee, her eyes scanning the tablet resting on her desk. The morning headline from a major financial outlet read, "Logistics Giant Ousts CEO Amidst Staggering Federal Safety Audit and Extortion Allegations." She didn't gloat. There was no triumphant fist pump or self-satisfied smirk. To Victoria, this was simply the necessary, mechanical functioning of a system designed to protect people. She filed the digital report into a secure federal database, archiving Bradley Covington into the permanent record of her agency's victories. She set her coffee mug down, picked up her silver pen, and reached for the next thick, red-tab dossier on her desk. The skies were measurably safer today. The line between unhinged entitlement and absolute authority had been firmly, permanently drawn. And there was always more work to be done. We've all witnessed that breathtaking moment of unearned entitlement when someone believes their bank account or status gives them permission to treat others like stepping stones. Bradley Covington thought he was untouchable, existing in a bubble where his demands were law and his prejudices were justified. But true power doesn't need to scream, belittle, or snap its fingers at flight attendants. True power sits quietly in seat 2A, holding a federal badge and an unwavering moral compass. This story is a powerful reminder that the universe has a phenomenal sense of humor, and karma often wears a tailored suit and refuses to give up her window seat. If this story of absolute, undeniable karma hitting back hard made your day, hit that like button. Share this video with someone who loves seeing entitled bullies get the reality check of a lifetime, and make sure to subscribe to the channel and ring the bell so you never miss out on more incredible, real-life drama stories.